The lot on East Main Street, 45 East Main Street, is just under a quarter acre, very narrow in the front, and it's pretty deep for a quarter acre lot. It has a shared driveway with the neighbor next door, which was not unusual back 200 years ago. The house was built around 1840, renovated over the years, and there was probably another structure in the back of the lot at that time, but we're not sure what it was. Likely a barn, based on the agrarian time period that, it would have been horses or a carriage or something back there. The great part about Mendham is that the historic district is an overlay area on the master plan for just a portion of the master plan in Mendham Borough. And basically what it does is it helps govern with recommendation policies on how to help keep the Mendham Borough historic appearance and character to stay the same, whether it's the properties or the buildings or whatnot in those areas. And it's expanded a couple times since, I think, 2001. There was a revision in '09, and I believe there may be one more expansion of the historic district coming in the next year or so. They're working on that. And basically what it does is you as an applicant or an owner of a property, you'll go apply for a building permit. Once it's recognized that you're in the historic district, the zoning officer and the building department will send you over there to apply. It doesn't cost. I think there's a minimal cost to it. And they review what your plans are. And when they review that, they try to give recommendations to help you make good decisions to keep that character of Mendham. And a lot of the reasons why people come to Mendham is because they love the Main Street Village. That village corridor is welcomed by most people who move here. It's made up, or the commission, I should say. The Historic Commission is made up of a few components. You have a chairman, and I believe there are 5 members on the board with 2 alternates, and the mayor appoints them all, usually confirmed, I believe, by the Mendham Borough Committee. And Mike Zadalis is the chairman there now. I think Nick Cassano is the architect of record on that board. Chris Nicholson, another person who's been on it a long time, has some interesting roots in Mendham, is a member. John Dannenbaum's a member. There's probably 1 or 2 others. And they work hard to make it easy for the residents and the businesses to get what they want, but also work within the same parameters of what they're looking for in the historic. It's for the Historic Commission to work with. It's kind of interesting. They're not going to tell you what color to paint your house. It's just not something they do. You can ask them what they think, and they'll give you some feedback if they have it. But at 45 East Main Street, for example, that was a wood-sided building with true divided glass windows, double hung windows, and with shutters, wood shutters on the outside. And the historic district really wanted to, or the commission wanted to, try to maintain that look. So they don't want to see you run in there and maybe add vinyl siding. They feel that that's going to be a letdown in what their goals are. So the windows at the East Main Street home, you had some choices. You could try to renovate what you have. You could replace in kind if you would. And most of what they're really trying to guide you towards is what's seen from the street, what the corridor that you're driving through or walking through as a pedestrian might be viewed. So if you have something you'd like to do in the back of the house that maybe isn't the same character as the front, but it's going to save you some money because they are sensitive to financial hardship, they'll allow you to do some different things in the back. Yeah, at 45 East Main Street, the narrow lot forms a narrow house, which forms a very small back. There wasn't much financial gain to change what we were doing throughout the home. So we did a combination of things, of renovating existing windows and replacing and reusing other windows. And some of them are new, some of them were reused. So really does not govern anything on the inside of your home. So you have a lot of flexibility. They're not looking to reach into your pockets there. There are times, and 45 East Main Street would be a great example, where there was a fireplace inside the home that was exhausting some of the flue pipes for the appliances, a furnace and some other things. And obviously that's inside the home, not important to Historic Commission. However, it does poke through the roof, and now it becomes an exterior item. So there are times when something inside may impact outside, and you just have to talk that through with them. Approaching a house like this is not for the weak at heart. When you're thinking about or considering purchasing a home like this, you need to have some pretty strict goals, and then you also have to have some great flexibility. So in this case, the property was being purchased with the concept of renting. So your strategy is slightly different, can be different, than if you were purchasing this home to either sell it, renovate it and sell it, or renovate it and live in it. And in this case, because we were renting it, we worked a budget that was kind of backed into from what kind of rent could we get. So if we could get a good rent at X price, okay.
Financial model for renting doesn't work. So that's very simple. You can only put so much into it. You got to get a certain rent back, and that certain rent's got to cover the nut. So we're going to get it to be what I would call very pleasing to the eye, suitable house. The inside's going to be, you know, so much better than what it was, but it's not going to be super high-end Mendham, if you will. I think what's going to end up happening is someone's going to buy this house eventually, and they're going to take out everything I did on the finish level and really just add a whole nother layer of skin to it, especially on the inside. That's going to bring it to another dimension of, you know, a high-end historic house in Mendham. And ultimately, what is, you know, where do I stand in that? Basically, we're saving it. That's what it is right now. You let this go a couple more years with the gutters like this, and the whole building begins to rot, and then you got to take the building down. So for us right now, we're kind of saving it, and we'll bring it back to be a pretty strong building. And
I've been working for Brian Seavey for nearly 20 years, and Brian knows I love to work on old houses as he does, and when he was looking at buying this house, we walked through it to see what potential it had and how I could help you know, put his vision together. Well, I knew this house for many, many years, being on the Historic Society in Mendham, and it's a great Greek Revival house in Mendham. It's been for sale forever, and it just has such potential. It's fairly unique in the streetscape. Most of the houses in Mendham are more Victorian in nature, and the Greek Revivals you just don't see too many of. But well, these houses, almost all of them, have been renovated over the years, so it's very hard to tell. The way I go about looking to try to understand the age is down in the basement, in the foundations. So you don't know what was here originally, but if you look at the old stone foundations in here, this is a 18-inch thick stone foundation wall, which was probably part of the original structure. That porch is an addition. You could see it's parged concrete block probably, and even this bay is an addition. Totally different joint work in the bay. You see how the joints are all fine, and here it's much more. It was probably just a rubble stone foundation that they parged in later with concrete, with mortar. I'm sorry. So you have three different age foundations, but this tells me, which would be normal for this, that this bay was put on later, and so it was originally, when it was built, it was not a Greek Revival house. It was probably more early colonial house, much like the other houses. And then what would normally happen is when they did additions, they would bring the house up to speed, or up to the latest style in architecture. And so you take a colonial house, you would take a colonial house and then put Greek Revival ornament on it. So that bay, as you can see, is added later on. But they followed basically a lot of the same lines.
The porch, the part of the addition.
Porch was probably part of the addition as well. It's not part of the original foundation. And you could see the porch stands proud of the street line. If you look down this street, the porch is in front of the line of where all the other houses are. Well, there were two major parts that Brian was trying to achieve. Two major things that Brian was trying to achieve when he asked me to come look at the house. One was obviously the house is in terrible disrepair, and so we were trying to look at how to restore the house and what would need to be done to the house to bring it back up to just working form, but also how to keep as much of the historic content as possible. Then the other part was that originally in this portion over here, where we have our addition, there was this 1960s, 1970s terrible addition done. It was a one-story addition that really took an old porch and then added to it. It was terrible looking, and it was probably one of the reasons why the house didn't sell, because it just was so horrible. And Brian wanted to make the house more. I'm sorry. Brian wanted to take the house and make it, bring it up to the standards of today's living standards. Bring it up to. So we wanted to get 4 bedrooms in the house. We wanted to get a large kitchen in the house and a large family room in the house. Things that the house didn't have at this point. So we decided to do a 2-story addition in the back here. In terms of the style of the house, keeping the style of the house, we really looked at the old house, which we thought was beautiful, and just tried to bring that style into the new addition. So we really tried to keep the lines. But as you can see, we jumped in a foot over here in this corner. And this brings up one of the challenges you deal with adding to old houses, is that house, which, to answer your previous question about what year is the house, it probably is an 1800s house, anywhere from 1820s to 1880s would be my prediction. But it's hard to know because, like I said, they've been renovated so often. But one of the problems with dealing with a house that old is that nothing is plumb and square anymore. The walls are that wall that we're looking at right there, that corner, where our new addition meets the old house, that corner is probably out of square and out of plumb by a number of inches. So if we were trying to do an addition that attached right to the corner, then we would have a lot of difficulty because we'd be trying to build square and plumb, but we wouldn't be attaching to something square and plumb. So having offsets like this 1-foot offset, allows the two houses to kind of float independent of one another. The other problem is that, and this was a major problem in this house, or a major issue that we had to resolve, is that today's building standards are much higher than they were in these days. So all of the framing in this house that exists is not up to today's building codes. So we had to deal with, instead of 2x4 construction, 2x6 construction. Instead of 8-inch floor and ceiling joists, we were dealing with 9.5-inch floor and ceiling joists. So none of these things could correspond to one another. So we had to have offsets and make accommodations for these different kind of framing. And you want to do it in a way that's positive rather than seemingly negative to the overall look of the house.
Any other?
Originally, when it was modernized, let's say, to be a Greek Revival house from whatever it was before that, they had a nearly flat roof on the house. Now it still looks flat from our angle, but it was a nearly flat roof with a what we call a Yankee gutter, which is a gutter that's concealed in the roof framing. Those gutters were aesthetically very pleasing, but notoriously for failing and leaking. And as you can see, this one failed and leaked and rotted all of the roof members at the end. So that is all going to be need to be replaced. But at some point, they built another roof on top of the old roof to get a pitch on top of the roof, so that the water would shed off more easily. And in between the two roofs is a small attic. And what's interesting is we were able to find some old newspapers and things like that in between the construction that might have dated when that new roof was done. Basically in the 1930s, and I believe the newspapers were from. So that might have been when they, when that Yankee gutter started to leak, and they started to try to fix those conditions. So again, with our roof, as you can see, we set it back a bit so that we weren't trying to tie in to exactly where that roof was, in order to give us some flexibility with how that transition would come, because our framing is significantly deeper than the existing framing, and gave Brian some options on trying to figure out how to get a new gutter system on and things like that. We also, with the windows, they're beautiful windows. You couldn't get a window like that today. If you take a picture of that window in the middle there, you could see how the glass is the old float glass, which is very textured, and it adds such character to the house. Also, the mutton pattern the stiles and rails and the muttons are very thin, which again is not really today's standards, but they really add to the historic nature of the house. So Brian has decided to restore these windows rather than replace them, to keep the nature of the house, and also restore the shutters, which are beautiful and really add to the character of the house. Historic Review Committee standpoint, our charge on the Historic Review Committee is to really keep the character of Mendham, especially the Main Street corridor, and now it's been expanded to some of the other areas in Mendham. And we look to keep not only in as much as possible to retain the character of the streetscape, but also when people do additions, that those are also in character with the streetscape. And this house is, like I said, is a great example in Mendham of a wonderful Greek Revival house, but it had fallen into such disrepair that we didn't know what we were going to really be able to do. And in order to let me just think here for a second. Windows and roofs and siding, is we try to advise them on how to keep within the character of Mendham and how to keep within the character of the house. Most people who buy a house like this are coming in with their eyes wide open. They understand some of the things that are involved, and they're usually excited, like Brian, to renovate the house. And so we look at that, we review it, and to see if it's consistent, and then we may be able to give them some advice on certain things from our experience. When Brian came before the committee, he had done a lot of historic renovations in Mendham already. And it was a very simple process, because what he was doing was really exactly what we were hoping people who buy older houses do. They take them, they restore them, and then they add to them to make them usable for the next generation of users. of homeowners. In terms of larger size, but not enlarging it so much that it just takes away from the character. So it was a very good meeting that we had with Brian. As soon as Brian brought me into the house and we entered into this hallway, you just struck with the beauty of the historic quality of the house, the railing swooping up, and the windows. And also these houses, because they're small and because they were really built before, great access to electrical lighting and things like that, they have such a great quality of light from windows. If you look, the windows are directly across from one another, which helps bring light into the house, but also was done for cross ventilation for heating and cooling the house. For cooling the house. But most of the rooms will have windows on two sides, which again keeps natural light coming into the house.
The first time I walked into this house, there was someone living here. You couldn't walk through any room without them going through a path of garbage, cigars, cigarettes, animals. When I end up buying it, the building's empty, and it looks dramatically better than when it was filled with all kinds of stuff. But this room is, on the budget we're on, is going to be just a cleanup. So we're going to scrape the ceilings, replaster, try and work with the walls and clean them up, and then I'll say revitalize the windows and all the paint. The floors in here are wonderful Doug fir, and I don't know why anyone put this linoleum down, but if you look underneath here, you get this beautiful, which I can't at the moment, of course, but there's a great Doug fir floor, so we're going to refurnish all the Doug floors in here. And that's kind of the plan for this room. So this will be a parlor room like it would have been in the olden days. Sitting room for your guests. This was a living room of some kind. Pretty bad condition. The fireplace, we're going to revitalize that also, refurbish it, but not so it's usable, just so that it's decorative. To rebuild an old fireplace is a giant fire hazard if you don't go all the way back down and rebuild it from the floor up. And a lot of house fires start that way, so our plan is to just make it look clean, and somebody can put some candles in it to make it look pretty. This building, Mike, is post and beam, and you can see from the old construction that this beam here had notches in it. At one time there was a stud in here like these other studs on the walls, and it would have notched right into these beams and down to a partition wall. We think that bay was added at some point, and we'll have to look at the historical photos. Maybe we'll catch something where maybe the bay's not actually on here. But the bay really adds a nice dimension to the room and to the outside facade, which is really nice. It needs a lot of work. Done a lot of demo and framing in the past. It's probably the last week, just after the storm from Sandy. And this is going to be the kitchen eating area. So there was a kitchen here before. It was in horrible shape. You almost couldn't eat in it. And we've gutted that out. We're going to take a good chance of making a nice kitchen out of this. There's kind of some interesting things in here. We discovered this as we were here. If you look at the top of this beam, there's bark. That's tree bark on there. And that's what they would have done. They wouldn't, they didn't want to waste anything, and there's a lot of energy. Go ahead and cut another beam. So we're actually gonna remove every other one of these. One here, one here, one here, and I'm going to extend the ceiling so it actually goes up, down, over, up, down, and you'll see these beams, and that essentially gets us more ceiling height. It's something we discovered when we gutted it, so that's the great thing of doing it yourself, is you get to make those decisions. But this will be an interesting kitchen. You'll have a refrigerator here that's going to go into this wall, and then a bank of cabinets with a sink, dishwasher, more cabinets. There'll be a stove here with a hood and a microwave, and then there'll be an island right here in the middle. Certainly 200 years ago, not too many islands. So hopefully when we come back in a few months, we'll have a whole brand new kitchen. You put these little pieces of wood over, and that's why you see all these little nails in here. These are pieces of what they call lath. And the lath would go in, and then they'd come and they'd mix some mud up, and that would be this brown coat here, which is like almost a masonry consistency, but a lot of sand in it, so it crumbles easily. And they'd smooth that over all the lath, and then they'd put a finish coat on it, and that's what you see in that other room, except when they painted it, it's now peeling because of the moisture issues. So that essentially is what drywall was. Maybe prior to 1920, this is what you would have done. Something like this. They might use wire and then lath, or wire and then brown coat and skim. But plaster was the way to the olden times you finished a wall. Nowadays, to plaster a house, and some people like plaster finishes, it's probably 3 times as much the cost of what just drywall and spackle. There was an old fireplace here. Old in the sense of your age and my age, Mike, but not so old that it had any value. Was used primarily for the furnace. And the oil-fired furnace was emitting its fumes through that furnace. We don't want it. It ruins the kitchen. And we're going to put a high-efficiency furnace in, and that gets rid of kind of a probably oil-fired furnace. I bet you that's a 1920 furnace down there, and that'll be removed. It looks like a train. So basically here, we took down the addition that was here, went back down to the floor height, and then reframed everything all new. So this will be a laundry room right here to our left, and then you're going to walk through this doorway, and you're going to have a family room, and then a vestibule entrance in this section over here with some cubbies or lockers. And you can see here we have plywood on the outside of the walls. We don't have that on the old house. 2x6 studs. Everything's framed differently, and that's how it's done in the modern.
Yeah, so we have window.
Right. And then double window, double window.
How far back do you go?
The lot goes back to where those logs are back there. And there's an old foundation in the ground there. We're assuming it was a barn, because almost all these properties have barns. But the barn's no longer standing, so it wasn't here when we got here, and I don't even remember it being there as long as I've lived here. So basically, we're looking over the high school and the cemetery out the back, out that way. That's where that rolls down to.
What kind of a lot is this? It's a narrow, long?
Narrow. This one's narrow and short.
Short.
So it only goes to those logs right in there. The gentleman next door, his lot goes all the way to the backwoods. And I was asking him about it the other day. He's like, I don't know why I have all that land. I don't use it, and they don't let me do anything with it except pay taxes on it. So the classic old-time answer.
Some of the challenges that we were hit with right off the bat were the ceilings are very low. I think they're around 7 foot, maybe a little bit over 7 foot. And so how we dealt with that, especially knowing that our framing was going to be deeper on the new part of the house, becomes a challenge in all these old houses. In the older houses, of course, the rooms are smaller. So the lower ceilings, which are done not only, they were done mainly at, people were shorter, but also they didn't want to have high ceilings because they didn't want to have to heat more space. Heat was a major issue. But again, in the older rooms, they were smaller, so you don't notice as much the ceilings being lower. But in today's rooms, we like to have them larger, and when a larger room has a lower ceiling, it even feels lower. You really feel the. I'm sorry. When the room gets larger. And the ceiling doesn't get any higher, it really starts to come down on you. So in this portion of the house, this was originally a square room, but again, they added that bay, and this probably ended the original house. So it was just 2 rooms and a hallway, and probably a small room over here. Usually the kitchen area would be back here, and the living area would be in the front. There may have been, it may not have been 2 full stories. It might have been a half story up there for sleeping area. But again, it's very hard to tell because these houses were completely renovated when they were added to and the style was changed. As you can see, there's some major rot issues on this bay. And this was probably one of the most significantly damaged areas. So this will have to be rectified. But in terms of trying to update this to today's living standards, we wanted to leave as much as possible of the old part of the house intact to maintain the character, but then take the newer parts and the more renovated parts and bring them up to today's living standards. So one of the issues was the kitchen was tiny, and we had a tiny little living room. Again, these old houses, everything was little square rooms with little openings, and you could even see on the floor here that how narrow the opening was, probably about 2 feet. And the same thing over here, how narrow the opening was, again 2 feet. In today's standards, we like to have more of a more open plan, and so we worked to open up the doorways to again let more natural light into all the rooms, and then take away walls where we could create one large room out of 2 smaller rooms. So you could see in here we removed this wall, which gives us a structural challenge, but we were able to come up with ways to reinforce the structure and remove walls. So this will be a great kitchen, an eat-in kitchen area now, and also the center of the house, right in between the old part and the new part.
Now, does the Historic Commission care what happens inside the house?
The Historic Commission is mainly concerned with what can be seen from the public way. So even on facades, if you could see it from the public way, which would be, of course, anything that's facing the street, but also the side of the house, because as you walk down the street, you see the side, but not necessarily the back of the house. If you can't see it from a public way, we generally give much more latitude than we do if it is seen from the public way. So in the same way with this house, we were focusing on obviously keeping things that were seen from the public way in maintaining the historic character, but we wanted to do the same thing for the back as well. But in certain instances, we had to do things that, to update the house for safety standards, we needed fire egress windows, which had to be of a certain size that they couldn't align with the rest of the windows in the house. So we put those to the back of the house so that in looking at it from the public ways, all of the other windows aligned, whereas the ones that were going to be not aligned would be only seen from the backyard. This room was a particular challenge in the design because we had one large room It was a concrete slab. It was over the existing garage, and we needed to create a room above it. So we took down the existing room that was here, right down to the slab, but it was a very awkward room when it started. So this 20 by 20 space was going to be, there was going to be a second story on top of it. We needed to get more ceiling height in this space because of our new framing was going to be deeper than the original framing, and it's such a large space that if we maintained the same ceiling height, it would have felt just like a pancake. So we bumped the framing up higher here, creating a step between the old house and the new house on the second floor. And we then also cut the room, instead of having one large 20 by 20 room, we cut it into two spaces to break down the scale of the room. And also created an area where we could get some of the service pieces of the house that we would need. Service pieces of the house that we would need, like a mud room, a laundry room, and an office pantry room. And again, in this part of the house, in keeping with the tradition of old houses, we have windows on three sides. That one's covered over just because of the sheathing. But three sides, we really get a great view here. We get cross ventilation and lots of natural light. That large beam across the back of the house is unusual. We put that in because the garage doors that are underneath that are built in a way that are not by today's standards. So we wanted to not put any extra load on those and to more reinforce the house. So we put a beam in the base of the wall so that it didn't interfere with our windows and didn't interfere with some of the other aspects of the framing. Interesting challenges because the house was added to in the 1800s, and it was kind of done awkwardly. There's odd hallways and odd connections in between the rooms. The bathroom was tiny, so we needed to really do a lot of work up here to rework things in order to get two bathrooms for the upstairs and to get a master bedroom suite that was more in keeping with what people are used to today. So what we ended up doing was taking the one bathroom and enlarging it over here, and then again, when we added to the house, we raised it up one step and then added the master bedroom suite over here and tucked in the master bathroom in the what was once an old small bedroom. And in here, once we raised up this portion of the house, then of course we came into the issue of having very low ceilings on the second floor. And the master bedroom was going to be the largest room, largest bedroom in the house. We didn't want it to have the lowest ceiling, so we made a cathedral or a tray ceiling in this area. And you could see that in order to get this extra space, you have to do some fancy framing. But it really helps to have that extra 1.5 feet or so. Also, here you could see the issue that we had with the windows of the original house, which are very low to the ground, and the new windows, well, the new area, the placement of the windows. For egress, we need a certain size window, but it also has to be a minimum distance off the floor, so no one could fall out. So these two windows weren't going to align, and we put those on the back of the house, as I mentioned before.
The whole program?
Well, like, you know, which rooms are which. This is the master bed. This is the master closet and stuff like that. Yeah.
This is a closet.
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
It's
the master closet.
I'd kill for a closet.
People could live with small bedrooms for the kids and things like that, but master bedrooms are, you know, a very big point to the house, and so you want to take the opportunity to bring it up as close as today's standards as you can. So we wanted to have a large closet, we wanted to have a large bathroom, and you know, a beautiful bedroom with windows on all three sides.
This is the bathroom right here?
Yep. So here was a challenge because we were going between the old part of the house and the new part of the house. So we put the vanities up here, and then you step down into the toilet and shower area and linen closet. So we made a natural break in between the two functions of the bathroom, between just the washing up and things like that, and the other parts of the house. The systems of the house, which generally, the structural system, as we talked about, the challenges were that our new house is built at a much higher standard, so the framing is larger, and getting those things to align is very difficult, but we talked about that. The heating systems, they actually haven't changed that much, so it's not that difficult to extend and bring those in. Often, though, air conditioning, when you have ductwork, you know, here the heating is radiator heat, but when you're trying to bring ductwork into a house, that is a large challenge. So what we usually do is we try to split the system, and instead of trying to go through the walls, we put one system in the attic and then one system in the basement, and feed the first floor from the basement and the second floor from the attic. Wiring is much easier to get through because it could go up, down, over, but plumbing is another major issue, especially in older homes, because they're undersized framing to begin with, and when you start cutting into it to get plumbing runs, which have to work on gravity, it becomes difficult. So you need to think about your plumbing right from the very start of renovating an old house, of how am I going to get this toilet drain down to the basement? Because if you don't think about it, it'll become an issue. This is true in modern houses as well, but it becomes even more important in renovating old houses, because you don't have the latitudes that you would have in a modern house. Yeah, this fireplace is probably not the original fireplace location, and really the biggest problem with older homes is water damage. And so if these older homes have a good roof, they can last forever. But once you get water damage, you could see what it does. It just literally, it not only rots wood, it just takes apart the brick. And sometimes that's behind a wall that you can't even see. So maintaining the roofs on older homes are just very, very important.
Already.
Any home, yeah. They used to say if you want to take down a barn, cut a 12 by 12 hole in the roof and then just wait. Nature will do the rest.
This house on East Main Street was recognized by all, really, as needing a lot of work. There was going to be a lot of rot. The roof was let go, which allowed water to get in the home. And once water gets in your home, the most important thing you can do to a building really is keep the roof up, because it protects everything underneath. And in this case, that wasn't what happened. And a lot of things rotted: siding, studs, sill plates, all the things you really don't want to have to mess with as a renovation. And it took a lot. And when I say that the weak-hearted wouldn't want to deal with this, those are the things that are hard to control when you hire a contractor, because there's so many unknowns. So we went in there with a goal of knowing what we wanted to spend, but we also went in there knowing that we're going a little bit blind, because so the strategy for buying a home like this, you have to consider a bunch of things. Like I said, we're renting it, and in renting it, many of the same concerns for renting are the similar concerns for buying. People do not want to live in a master bedroom with a single door, non-walk-in closet where they just don't have enough storage. They don't want a kitchen that has 1960 appliances, chipping Formica countertops. So you have to look at a couple of the main ingredients, and in almost every project we go into outside of a house like this is similar to this one. Is they want a master bedroom and a master bath with some good closet space, and they want a good kitchen family room. Those are the first two on almost everyone's list, and most of the additions you'll see around town are typically that kind of plan. So we did something similar. Walking into this house, it's 1840s. There is no such thing as a master bedroom back then. The kitchen was, I think, about a 10 by an 11 room. Our first strategy. Let's make this home somewhere in today's standard. So in putting on the addition in the back, we ripped off an old addition, and we formed basically a kitchen family room association on the first floor. And Nick Cassano, the architect, and I said, all right, if we're going to do that, we really need to come up with a master bedroom. And it currently was a home that didn't have that, and the bedrooms in the front were very small. So we had a choice of doing a one-story addition, or a two-story addition. And the two-story addition just made all the sense in the world after many different iterations of how can we do this. And we put the master bedroom right above the first floor kitchen family room addition. So that was kind of the approach there. And then we did all the other little things that people look for. So we renovated the bathrooms, we put new heating and cooling in, all those things that you also need as a new home as opposed to something from the 1800s. Okay. Some of the anticipated challenges we faced on this home are ones that you would expect from a home with a bad roof. So the rot was bad, and there's a bay section of the home that's a two-story bay on one side, and the sills were rotted so bad and the framing underneath were so bad that it had to be not only reconstructed, but it had to be jacked up on both levels, which also impacted the roof. So that was a challenge that we knew about going in, but we also didn't know how much it was really going to be until we pulled the skin off both the outside and the inside, meaning the plaster, the lath, and then the siding. And we found a lot of what we thought we'd find, and we found a little more too. So that was one of the big challenges. I would say that recognizing that plaster repairs are not easy to do. We had many different facets of ways to handle that also. So those were the big challenges to make it look good. The rest are your typical renovation challenges. Unexpected challenges that really tied together. The first unexpected challenge was there was an appliance fireplace inside the home that after doing our designs, so we've already purchased the home and we're doing design at the same time. So as much as you think you can design before you own it, you just don't have that time flexibility in purchasing, but meanwhile you already have design, because you don't want to spend the money on the architect when you haven't purchased a home. So you kind of go in there running both of those sequentially, which is unfortunate. You'd like to run them in parallel, but you don't want to spend money on an architect on something you're not going to buy. So you buy the home, you have some thoughts, you move forward, you hire the architect, we get into it, you realize the Family Kitchen Room Association is so important, there's a fireplace coming through the middle of that plan. Oh boy, how are we going to handle that? It really was a fireplace chimney to handle the appliances. We have to get rid of it. Okay, so we're going to get rid of it. What does that really mean? Well, it means we're going to switch our furnace downstairs. So now that we're switching our furnace, how does that ripple effect tie in? Well, we have an oil furnace at the moment, and most people don't love oil. Happens to be an above oil tank type setup. So that's better than being in-ground. The in-ground had been removed. But the boiler was so old, we're now going to have to replace that. So now you consult with your HVAC contractor, and he comes in and he says, well, do you want air conditioning? Because it's an 1840 house, and air conditioning meant opening windows. It didn't mean air conditioning. So we put an air conditioning unit in. Okay, well, that's great. You've done all those things. You've gotten rid of the chimney. Do you want to keep oil? You know what? I think we want to go to natural gas. Right now, this era of time, that seems to be the way to go. So that was the decision. Well, Hurricane Sandy hit last year in October timeframe, I guess, or September, October. And resources from the state on a public utility side all went to the shore. And other states even. What that meant for us was we could not get a gas line service to our home for quite a while. And that was a challenge we had no idea was coming. That hit me from behind. I didn't know, and it delayed the project. We couldn't get heat into the building the way we wanted to. We weren't sure we were going to get a gas line even, and that added extra delays. So there was some stress wrapped around that because we had already committed to removing the chimney, which was gone. Didn't really want to go to oil. So that was a challenge that we didn't really see coming. This home is a Greek Revival home. It's a home that the architect, Nick Cassano, is very comfortable with dealing with. He's done it before. And there are a couple sprinkled throughout Mendham. You'll see a couple of those styles around. And again, it usually goes back to that older style. I don't know if there was a builder who came through maybe at that time and had an influence possibly on some of the homes. You'll see a couple of them on Hilltop, not far from the Pastime Club. So the condition of the home at East Main Street was not good, mostly because of the roof. Back in the 1800s, and this home was probably renovated sometime later than that, where they added an entire roof structure to it. So somewhere between 1840 and where we are today, there was a large renovation done. And they installed what's called a Yankee gutter system, where the gutter is actually hidden inside the roof. And the water comes down the roof, it collects, and it goes down a hidden downspout. That was a common practice. You'll see them on Victorian homes a lot. And what it does is it hides the gutter, which is what we have typically today. That leaked substantially. And by leaking within the roof system, it rotted out the roof and the rafters and then the siding and the windows. And anywhere where that water cascaded down the building, we had substantial rot. So in putting a package back together to capture the Greek Revival look and the modern techniques of today that help bring water somewhere else, the entire package, that entablature, needs to be proportioned correctly. So Nick worked hard to try and make all those elements come together so that when we were all done, although we had a new gutter system with new moldings and a little bit of a new shape, it still mimicked that Greek Revival look by getting us the functionality of removing water from the home. Many of the details of the house for the Greek Revival, and all homes, frankly, they look better as you add each little layer of detail. So we often talk about shadow lines, and trying to increase shadow lines really makes a house pop a little more. You start to see different elements. The shutters, big part of that. I mean, you could go and screw plastic shutters on the house, and they would technically be shutters. But these were already wood on real hinges. The Historic Commission asked us to replace those and try and renovate that look so that we could keep that appearance and all those shadow lines. So that was very important to the home. The window trim, the true divided lights, the entablature moldings around the underside of the soffit, the corner boards, all those things are critical in making the house give it more of a traditional look.
Now
the portico on the front of the house is a defining feature. It would be great if we could dial back and see what that house was originally and how did it come to be where it is. We were fortunate that there are 4 very large columns holding up that portico in the front, and there was rot at the bottom, which we did some removal, repair, and put it back. We put a small base on the bottom of each column. The lucky part was that was probably one of the better sections of the home. We didn't have a lot of rot from the gutters there, and there was no siding underneath it. So any water that was coming off those bad gutters was really just dripping onto a stone porch. The siding on the home is an interesting dilemma. When you get a home like that, you want to take the siding off and replace it. You then have to, it's unusual not to replace the windows. So you have to replace the windows, you replace the siding. We anticipated that a house that old would probably have no plywood under it. So we then would also have to sheathe it. And it created a ripple effect of, do you really take the house down? So our budget wasn't formatted towards that. We didn't want to take the building down. So our plan was to try and save what siding we could. So on the back of the home, we put a sizable addition on. When we did that, we took the siding off and we saved a bunch of it. and then recycled it in spots on the other side of the building where we had rot, or where the sills got replaced. When we removed the siding, it almost disintegrated in our hands. So we kept some of the old siding, and then we filtered some of it back in. In some cases, there was so much that we used hardy plank on the back addition. And by using the hardy plank, it gives it'll last a very long time. It's a new product, it's a composite, it doesn't rot. We also integrated some of that into the old part of the house, and we weaved it back in, mixed in with the old siding. And then we took the old wood siding, stripped it down, reprimed it, repainted it, and gave it back. It's a challenge. I mean, everything at the house has a story, and the garage is definitely another story. When we bought the home, the garage had a wood floor, a dirt floor. Wood doors, dirt floor, and we thought, you know what, for a rental for now, that's more than most people get. Well, when we got into the project, the doors needed a lot of repair. The panels had been starting to peel, so we had to cut out the panels and replace some of the panels. The hardware is so cool. It's one of the old doors that flip out vertically towards you. You don't see that too often anymore. Early 1900s probably had that a lot. You'd see that often. I remember I had a relative in Richmond who had like a Richmond Hill, New York, had garage doors like that, which was kind of cool. But not practical. I mean, if you have snow there, you can't pull the door open without shoveling in front of your garages. So we ended up repairing the doors. The doors are not going to fit a Chevy Suburban. They're narrow, they're short, but we repoured the floors, we dug out the dirt, and now you have a nice garage. So it's usable space. It'd be great for. So the front room of the house was fully wallpapered, had some water damage in it, a lot of plaster damage. So we did a combination of things in that front room. We did minimal plaster repair, where we actually used some techniques to just put the plaster back together. We did some stripping, we put some new moldings in, we pulled out the steam heat, redid the wood floors. That front room probably would have been called a parlor back in the day, or a music room. Usually your guests would come in the front door and they'd be greeted in that room. That doesn't really work in today's society, but that's really how it works. And the front room really had minimal work done to it. We kept a lot of the old moldings on the windows and doors. So that was one of the rooms that was probably more of a rehab than a renovation or an addition. The wood floors was probably one of the most attractive item that most people walking in the house probably recognized. They were dirty, they were covered in a black soot, if you will, but you could see that they were in good shape underneath there, and that some sanding and some recoating and finishing would really make them dress up. I believe it's a straight grain Doug fir floor, and what's really nice about them is the strips of wood. It must be 8 to 10 feet long, which typically nowadays when you buy wood floor, you'll find short pieces. So we thought it was important to try and recapture that. In much of the house we did. In some of the home we added to it. Some of it we patched. Some of it we did very little and just sanded it, and it looks unusual because angles change and where walls got just pieced in, but we left it that way. We felt that that was adding to the character of the home. I think they came out great, and I don't think that's a decision we would have changed.
Condition when you walked in on that, and then what did you have to do to bring that back up to your standard there?
The core of the home, today's core and probably the core of years ago, is really the kitchen, dining room, fireplace room, if you will, which we reconfigured that format a bit. The kitchen eating area were 2 rooms when we purchased the home. We took the wall down in the middle, we did some structural work, and then we opened up a space that goes to the dining room where the fireplace is, and it has the bay. Those couple of rooms were in disrepair. The floors were rotted so bad in the bay that the floors were dipping down about 4 inches over maybe 6 feet. Probably in unsafe condition. The fireplace had its own issues that needed some minor repairs, and we did not bring the fireplace back other than aesthetically. The expense to try and rebuild it was too great. So we kept it as a visual, and you could probably like candles in there, but other than that, we really don't put any fires in there. The walls, the molding, the plaster, almost all of it got stripped. The ceilings got redone. In the kitchen space, Another unusual area where the kitchen floor slopes about 3 inches from front to back. And anyone building a kitchen cabinet area, trying to lay cabinets with a 3-inch change in floor elevation is it's a challenge. And we kept it. We couldn't fix the floors. It meant too much reconstruction. So at one end of the kitchen, you have a 33-inch countertop height, and on the other side, you have about a 37-inch countertop height. So you have options. It's flexibility based on your height. And if you walk in there, you know it, but it's unique. It lets you know that it's 1840s in a brand new kitchen. The bay windows, both on the lower level and the upper level, required a lot of renovation. A couple of the window frames, because we wanted to keep the glass, that was the blown glass, and if you replaced one window with a new window, we felt we'd have to replace all the windows. So instead of doing that, we took a couple of the really bad ones, we removed them, and we rebuilt them. So we rebuilt the sashes, the glass, the frames, the operations, the hardware, the moldings, the interior, the exterior. We didn't have to do that on every window, but a few of the windows needed that care. And then the other ones took less care, but some combination thereof what the first one did. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of time, a lot of labor. I think it came out great. I think when it's all said and done, if it's maintained that way over time, I think it will end up being a good decision. So I'm happy we did that way.
Tell me about...
To repair windows like that, you need I would call a fine mechanic, a carpenter that has fine patience, good tools, able to do a couple of different things, because you're cutting glass, you're reputtying different parts of that glass to get it to set in place so it still looks old, and then you're building frames with different kinds of joinery that it's involved. So it's not something you walk in there as a weekend warrior to try and rebuild. It's going to take some expertise. Is important because we believe the family dynamic, certainly in today's age and over the last at least 30 years that I can remember, every family ends up in the kitchen. So if the kitchen's not the right space, you could have some troubles either renting, selling, or moving into, if that's the space you want to habitate. So I think the best thing to do in a kitchen is you start there, is my feeling. So sitting with Nick Casano, we felt that the current plan when we purchased the home was wrong. It was a small room that had a cooking area and then a small room for eating. We didn't like that. So we took the wall down and we created a bigger space. We moved some spaces. We tucked the refrigerator into a closet area so that we could broaden the walls. And by doing that, we were able to get an island in. There was no islands in the 1840s. That just wasn't the way life is, and it is now. It's a congregating space. It's where you have a morning cup of coffee or a quiet lunch. And we also were able to get a table in there. Getting a table in that same space we felt was important. There are other challenges that go with a kitchen in today's era. The refrigerator is a good example. Now we hood exhaust our ranges, so when the modern family's cooking, the hood exhaust runs the exhaust fumes out of the home. That's not easy to do in a low ceiling house. So we had to design the kitchen around getting ductwork into timber frame, balloon framing type spaces. We were able to do it with just a small soffit, and that worked out quite well. So it has all the modern conveniences that you would have today with a modern dishwasher and sink and microwave, refrigerator and ice maker, and these are the things that today... The best advice I think I could give someone when renovating a kitchen would be, if you could move into the home with the old kitchen there and live with it for a month. Write down all the things that you hate and all the things that you love. I love that the glasses are to the right of the dishwasher. I don't like that the dishwasher opens and it's next to the stove when that opens. There are so many little things, and the kitchen is a personal space. So for someone to not understand where they're going, they need to know where they're coming from. And the plan of that is so important. I think Nick Casano often emphasizes a small, tight triangle, so that you're not walking 6 steps to fill a pot to walk back to your stove to get ice out of your refrigerator. So it's so important to someone who's comfortable in the kitchen that you are. The challenges with the family room space were that we had to, we didn't have to, but we decided to work within the footprint of the current foundation. So what does that do as a benefit as the purchaser? My partner and I both felt that expanding the home outside of its permit could require Board of Adjustment requests and other issues that could trickle down, zoning, engineering, etc. So we wanted to stay with the current footprint. And in doing so, we ripped down an old addition that was there and then formed it back up. So you need to use the structure that's currently there and work around that. It restricted us a little bit because of the form that we wanted, keeping that Greek revival look. And then the flow and the function of it was important. We wanted it to tie into the kitchen. We needed space to come in as a mudroom off the garage area, so you entered the house and had some space. So both the lower level and the upper level was massaged quite a bit to get that space to work with the kitchen space, so that the modern living would have a family room. Let's see. The heating and air conditioning on an older home is always one that you have to look at up front when you're buying an older house. If you are not willing to live with some oddities, it's probably not for you. So in heating and air conditioning the spaces, we had to travel ductwork through strange spots, whether it was closets, weird corners of a particular room that maybe that wouldn't be the corner you would like to put it in, but you felt it was the only corner you could get to unless you put a soffit in a room. And a soffit in a parlor or a living room just wasn't making sense for us. When we removed the steam heat, which was a little disappointing, we would have liked to have kept the steam heat, but again, it goes back to the oil and the chimney. So in the heating and air conditioning spaces, you'll find in that home that the newer spaces are probably well laid out. We have ductwork under windows, which is important. You want to have the ductwork near the doors and windows if you can, to supply the heating and cooling when it's the opposite outside. When you travel around the home and you look into the older rooms, you'll see, especially downstairs, we couldn't get to all those rooms the way we liked. So there are ductwork areas where, all right, we're going to live with that. It may be a little cool. The systems of the home, whether it was plumbing, electrical, fire safety, are one of those things that in renovating, you have some choices that you're not forced to do everything. There is some wiggle room within the building code. But certain things you're going to do because you don't want to have to do them a second time while the walls are open. So smoke detectors, required. To what level? We decided to take it all the way up to the modern code. So it's in every bedroom, every hallway, every floor. We have CO2 detectors also involved. The plumbing. You could bring a plumber in and use some of the old pipes. We decided that wasn't going to be the best choice. So we brought everything back down to the basement, which is where everything really starts, your water supply, your hot water supply. And we redid all the pipe work so that it had the correct sizing for today's plumbing fixtures. So if you had a body spray in a master shower, there's a certain pipe size that goes with a shower head, and all those things are important, or you're not going to get the water pressure you want. Dealing with older pipes, you're risking leaks. You're touching it now, although you may not be physically changing it. If you touch it and then bury it, chances are you're going to have something come back to haunt you. So we bring it all new. Electrical is similar. We tried to update most of where we were opening the walls, so we didn't leave a lot of the old wiring in the walls. There are a couple rooms that we couldn't get to unless we were going to gut them. In other words, pull all the plaster and lath down. That's a big project. It wasn't in the budget to do that to every room, so we had to circumvent around that a little bit. So we did that. So it'll be a little different when you're in the master bedroom. There are going to be plenty of outlets to plug things in. You go in the front bedroom, probably the same single outlet that was there was replaced and checked, but it's a single outlet. So you deal with some of the old, and you're going to be happy with some of the new.
Perfect.
The lath and plaster system in older homes is kind of interesting. Today, most people know it as drywall. You take drywall, you screw it or nail it on the wall, and you spackle and paint it. And essentially, it's a similar type system. It just was a lot harder to get to. So what you would do, instead of buying 4x8 sheets or somewhat bigger and put them on your wall, it was done with wood slats called lath, very thin slats, and you'd place them on the wall all the way up and down the wall. And then what you would do after you did that to all the spaces, walls, ceilings, etc., you would take a plaster mixture, which was like a mud, and you'd trowel it onto the lath. And the spaces between the lath formed a little groove that this mud would seep into and allow the mud to not fall onto the floor. And you'd trowel that for a while, and you'd let that dry, and then you'd come back and you'd put another coat on it, and then a finish coat on top of that, and that's how you got a plaster finish. It was a very hard finish. It was wood backed with almost a cement type wall. And as time went on, not only could you paint it, people got tinting finishes so that you didn't even have to finish it. You could finish the color in the final coat of plaster and give a very unique finish. Some of the unique things about that is you could form curves very easily. So Victorian homes inside that might have curved walls, mud is very easily, you could just trowel it right around a curve. A sheet of drywall is flat and hard, that creates some challenges. So that's why you'll see a lot of creativity in the olden days of uniquely shaped spaces that they could curve things really nicely. But that's what plaster and lath systems are. You don't see it much now. It's too labor intensive. The second floor of East Main Street, its existing conditions were small. There was no master bedroom on the back, and there was one very old bathroom needing a lot of repair. So we had a concept that we needed, not only did we need a bathroom up there, but we also needed that master bedroom, which we added in the back. We felt the front bedrooms, the two in the front specifically, were of good size. They had a decent closet in them, wonderful light. The one bedroom has the windows that look under the portico but out to the front street. Had the chimney in it that was leaking tremendously. The bricks were spalding, so we knew we had a lot of repair to do in there. But other than that, and there was wallpaper and skin issues to handle, but we went in there and we did some refinishing and we redid the floors. I think those rooms came out well. The banister feeding up to that space would probably not work with today's building code, but because you're doing rehab, it wasn't necessary for us to replace that. We did have to repair it. We tried to use some local people in doing some of these renovations. So there's a woodworker in town named Bob Steinbeck, who's got a lot of family roots in the area. He spun some new spindles for us so we could match the current spindles to these new ones and get a nice marriage. And it really came out great. Myself and a few other people would probably recognize the ones that were replaced, but that would be more about color than the actual shape, because the shapes are almost identical. So really, that came out really nice. It's got an old, big, thick handrail, which you really can, it's got a lot of meat on it, which is really unique. The bathroom upstairs was redone so that it's really a modern bathroom at this point. Very clean and timeless. It's kind of your white and white finishes, but it's a nice bathroom. It'll work well as a hall bath. The second bedroom back has the bay that was fixed from downstairs. The floors were all jacked up, and this was another room where the floors were dipping about 4 inches because downstairs was dipping 4 and everything just followed it. So when we jacked everything up and we rebuilt the windows in that room, we had to do a lot of plaster work in the ceilings in there because of the same leaks. But once we fixed all that, it's really a nice bedroom. The bay window at the end brings in a lot of light, which is really nice. It's got a cool closet. At first it looks like just your standard single door. There's going to be some hangers when you open the door, but as you stick your head in and look a little further, it sneaks around through the wall and goes to the third small bedroom behind it. So it shares a closet that you can walk from one to the other. I anticipate someday there'll be a child in each one of those, and they're going to have so much fun in those two closets. So,
I think a renovation like this.
the management of a project like this, it's not easy, and that would be true probably every builder saying that renovations are hard. You get thrown a lot of curveballs. You're never always sure what the next problem is going to be, so you're putting out a lot of fires. And the subcontractors are so important to a project like this, so you need to have a group of guys, or gals in some cases, that are on your team and can guide you not only in helping you financially get where you want to be, but also functionally get what you want as your end goal. I've often said, and you'll read this in a lot of books, that often these projects are kind of like a three-legged stool. And you have the architect, you have the owner, and then you have the builder. And those three stools, if it's good three legs, the project usually comes out well. In this case, myself and I have a good partner happens to be both two of those stools. We're the owner and we're the builder. And that makes the process easier. To be a homeowner involved in a project like this project would have taken considerably more time. There's more decision making being done, there's more discussions between the two players. So, you know, a subcontractor comes in and we might want to talk about the air conditioning. How are we going to handle that? And you know, we're going to go through what are the benefits of one type of air conditioning as opposed to maybe another one, or a different heating system from a separate heating system. And they usually take all that gathered information, and they may go back and sit down at their kitchen table one night and say, all right, what can we afford? What have we had before? What do we like? Where do we want to go with this? And then it comes back. Well, that takes a lot of time. My subcontractor and myself sit down, we say, this is the best road, this is the best path. We bypass all that. So there's a time delay in that portion that we're not doing, or we're doing it more quickly. It comes from experience. If you've done a lot of it, you know a lot of the pitfalls, and you try not to make the same mistakes that maybe you did on the first one many years ago. So handling all those people, putting them all together as a team, it's challenging, but you know, if you have a good team, it's like really anything else. You see it in sports. A homeowner handling a project like this, so if they were the third leg of the project, the architect, the builder, and the owner, one of the things that's so important, and it is true, you kind of get what you pay for. I've been around long enough to see a lot of people see builders walk away from projects. And you feel bad for them. Ultimately, it was probably a bad choice to begin with, maybe not enough research done on the person. Specifically on a renovation, because there's so many variables, there's probably 20% overage that you should expect on a project. So if your budget is $300,000, don't spend or plan to spend $300,000. You know, be in the $250,000 range and know that there's probably $50,000 of things I just don't know what they are yet, but we're going to spend them. I haven't seen a project yet that hasn't happened, and that's probably a good tip for people moving forward. The other one I would say, and I say this to a lot of people who do renovations, find the local guy. Find the guy who's not far from town, someone who's been around for a while on a renovation like this. If you're doing a new home, it's a little bit more commodity based. You can get a little bit more focused on budgetary numbers, but on a rehab, that's not always the same situation. So the local builder's probably going to have a little bit more knowledge with the building department, probably a little quicker on the fly with things that go wrong. So those would probably be the two things, the 20% and try and find somebody local. Yeah. The homeowner finding a contractor probably has to look at a couple of things. One is their experience and the scope of your project. Can you find a local person that's done some local work that you could go see? Find out, you know, not necessarily always what they did right, but when did something go wrong and how did they handle it? Did they take care of it? Things do go wrong. It's just the reality of it. It's not easy, but in most cases, some people are making $250,000, $500,000 decision. You need to do the same research. Some people do more work on buying a $40,000 car than they do on a $500,000 addition. So you really need to put a little bit of time into it. I think honesty and integrity is a big piece of it. It is a little bit like finding a spouse. You want to find a person that you have a good camaraderie with, but all the other things that need to back up to that. Have they done a project like this before? Can you go take a look at it? How many have they done like that? What were some of the things that they had problems with in a similar type project? Is there something that they would tell you to do maybe that the other homeowner didn't do or should have done and you recommended but they chose not to? So those are some of the things. Working on the project was fun. I love doing these projects. Often I wish there was never any money involved because it'd be a lot more fun, but that's just not the way things work. I loved taking what everyone really knew that was a home that had some future in it. And when we first started the project and bought it, I had a lot of people saying, what are you going to do with it? Oh, it's, I looked at it, we looked at it, I was considering doing that. And I guess we were the gluttons for punishment because we jumped into it. But then as it started to go along, I had people stop by. We're so happy you're fixing it up. Because Mendham is one of those communities where people feel responsible for their town. And they were all excited that something good was going to happen there. It wasn't getting torn down or, many of those kinds of things that people might ask. And then once we finished, we just had so many people say they loved it. Are you selling? Is it for sale? Can we buy it? We had a lot of those inquiries. And then just people saying, hey, it really came out great. Thankful that it was done. And that's kind of this town. It's a small town that way. A lot of people are. I find it interesting that when the Historic Commission first was created, and there was a lot of pushback that the borough was going to govern people's homes, if you will, and what you could do with them. And we are a very small town. We are somewhat of a historic town. I think it's, in America's society, it's an old town. It's an old village center. And the trend, even outside of Mendham Borough now, is to come back and live within the city, not out necessarily always to the suburbs. And this particular home was an asset from the beginning because of that. And as much as there was so much pushback on the Historic Commission early on and the overlay, I think it's done great things. It's served its purpose, and it's followed the trend of everyone coming back to the village centers and being able to walk to places. From that home, you could walk to every accessible needed item in Mendham Borough pretty easily. All three schools, the grammar school, the middle school, and the high school, down to the shopping center. We are almost split in between the shopping center, which is the modern day shopping, if you will, the King Supermarket and all the other things that are available down there. And then, there must be, I don't know how many churches, but you could go to every church. I mean, you can almost fall across the street and be at a church chapel immediately. You have restaurants right nearby. The famous Black Horse Inn is right there. You could walk to and fro. Yeah, you have the parks. You have. There isn't anything that you don't have that you can't get to. There is every amenity from those center streets, and a lot of people used to not want to live on a main street because it was busy, and you're starting to see a trend to go back to that now. That the pedestrian life is, it's attractive. It's attractive to have. You don't have to always be in your car. That house makes it an asset. I hope someday I'm in a house like that with a similar situation. I'm not sure how much longer it would have went where it wouldn't have had to been knocked down, and that would have been a loss for the town. And as much as we enjoy, making the budget work and renovating and making the financial model work, part of it goes to just love them where you're at and fixing something up. I mean, that's part of the personal benefit I get from it. I think there'll be another wave of renovations there at some point. But for now, I think it's in pretty good shape and in good hands, and it was fun. It was fun. I would do it again. Just one of those types of projects that are fun to do. The neighbors I would have to absolutely thank. We talked about it being a narrow lot. We talked about how long the project took. We talked about, it's pretty extensive. There's a lot of dirt, there's a lot of dust, there's a lot of noise, there's radios blasting, there's Saturday hammers going off. It is not easy to live next to a renovation, and in tight quarters. It's hard. It's not pleasing. I think they welcomed it because the house next door was getting fixed. That helped me to get through some of it, so it wasn't so hard for me to have good neighborly relations. They were just welcoming it. But as I said in the beginning, there's a shared driveway there. So on a day when we have 7 trucks there and we're trying not to clog the driveway, the immediate neighbor next door had to deal with all kinds of headaches from us. Trucks driving on his grass and on his side of the driveway, or he can't get out necessarily, and he was just such a good sport about it. And the same thing on the other side. She was so happy we were there that she came over and asked if we ever needed anything electric or a bathroom or anything. She offered the world just to see it get all fixed up. I didn't get a complaint from anyone over there, and I just appreciate all that they did to put up with our headaches and be patient.